Bewitched wasn't just another sitcom, it was television magic in its purest form. For 8 seasons, it made audiences believe that love, laughter, and a little witchcraft could fix anything. Viewers fell in love with Samantha's charm, her quick winks, and the way she could turn chaos into calm with just a twitch of her nose. It was comfort. It was an escape. It was the kind of show that made you forget, even for a moment, how ordinary real life could feel. But behind that sparkle, something darker was brewing. The laughter was fading, the chemistry was cracking, and one infamous scene, would become the moment everything came crashing down. It didn't just mark the end of an episode, it marked the death of the magic itself. So what really happened in that final scene that took Bewitched off the air for good? Join us as we uncover the tension, the truth, and the moment the magic vanished. What was Bewitched all about? When Bewitched first hit television screens in 1964, it wasn't just another sitcom, it was a spellbinding slice of television that blended humor, heart, and a touch of witchcraft in a way no one had ever seen before. For 8 magical seasons, it turned Thursday nights into a portal of wonder. The story was simple, yet captivating. A beautiful witch falls in love with a mortal man, marries him, and tries to live a perfectly normal suburban life, with an emphasis on trying. At its core, Bewitched was about love trying to survive in a world that didn't quite understand it. Samantha Stevens, played by Elizabeth Montgomery, wasn't just a housewife. She was a woman torn between 2 worlds. One was a world of broomsticks and spells, and the other was full of PTA meetings and dinner parties. Somehow, with just a twitch of her nose, she made both collide beautifully. Her husband, Darren Stevens, was played by Dick York during the first 5 seasons, and later by Dick Sargent after York's health forced him to step away. Darren was the quintessential mortal, ambitious, hardworking, and constantly in over his head, especially when Samantha's mother, Endora, swooped in to stir trouble. Played by the legendary Agnes Moorehead, Endora wasn't just comic relief. She was the embodiment of every mother-in-law from hell, only with a wand. The show's magic extended beyond the storylines. The opening credits, those iconic animated visuals of Samantha flying on her broomstick, were crafted by none other than Hanna-Barbera, the animation studio behind the Flintstones and the Jetsons. It set the tone perfectly. Light, whimsical, and unforgettable. Audiences couldn't get enough. Bewitched debuted as the 2nd highest-rated show in America, sitting just behind Bonanza. It was the highest-rated sitcom across all 3 major networks, and for its first 3 seasons, it stayed firmly in the top 10. For ABC, that was pure gold. The show wasn't just a hit, it was the show that defined the network's identity in the 1960s. The show had a rhythm. Every episode followed a comforting pattern. Darren would somehow end up cursed, bewitched, or caught in some supernatural mess. Mortals like his boss, clients, or nosy neighbors would get tangled in the fallout. And by the end, Samantha's love and clever magic would save the day. No matter how chaotic things got, it always came back to that embrace, that unspoken message that love could outlast even the wildest of spells. Behind the comedy, though, Bewitched quietly explored deeper ideas. It was about acceptance, identity, and compromise. Samantha's decision to suppress her powers to please her husband mirrored what many women in the 1960s were feeling, the pressure to dim their light just to fit into society's mold. Yet, despite that, Samantha always found a way to shine. She was independent, kind, and strong-willed, the perfect blend of rebellion and grace. The show's setting became just as iconic as its characters. 1164 Morning Glory Circle, a cozy suburban home that looked like the dream of every American family. Whether it was in Westport, Connecticut, or Paterson, New York, the show kept it vague. It represented the perfect neighborhood with white fences, manicured lawns, and a sprinkle of hidden magic. Even the sound of Bewitched was unmistakable. That cheerful theme song and those twinkling sound effects, whenever Samantha twitched her nose, became part of television history. The special effects were simple by today's standards, but back then, they were a marvel. Whether Samantha was levitating objects, disappearing in a puff of smoke, or freezing time, audiences were spellbound. Over time, Bewitched became more than just a show. It was a cultural phenomenon. It earned a spot on TV Guide's 50 Greatest TV Shows of All Time, and even had one of its episodes, Divided He Falls, ranked among the 100 greatest episodes ever. The series lived on long after its final episode aired in 1972, replaying endlessly in syndication and reminding new generations that a little magic never goes out of style. Even Hollywood couldn't resist trying to bottle that charm again. In 2005, Bewitched returned to the big screen, reimagined by Nora Ephron and starring Nicole Kidman and Will Ferrell. It wasn't a remake so much as a meta-spin on the original, a story about actors filming a new version of Bewitched, only for real magic to creep into their lives. And while it didn't quite capture the spell of the original, it proved one thing: Bewitched was timeless, its magic too strong to stay buried for long. The show was inspired by two movies. Bewitched didn't appear out of thin air. Its magic had already been cast years earlier on the big screen. The show drew inspiration from two classic films, I Married a Witch, starring the stunning Veronica Lake, and Belle, Book and Candle, with the captivating Kim Novak. Both movies explored the same irresistible idea. What happens when a witch falls in love with a mortal man? In I Married a Witch, Lake's Jennifer rises from the ashes of Salem to torment her enemy's descendant, but ends up falling for him instead. Novak's Gillian, meanwhile, was a modern witch in 1950s Greenwich Village, running an antique shop and accidentally falling for James Stewart's character. Both films were owned by Columbia Pictures, the same studio that would later bring that magic to television in the form of Bewitched. Samantha was almost played by a Broadway star, and Darren was almost played by the other Darren. It's hard to picture anyone but Elizabeth Montgomery with that mischievous smile and iconic nose twitch, but Bewitched almost looked very different. Before Montgomery bewitched America, the role was offered to Broadway darling Tammy Grimes, a Tony winner who was set to play a witch named Cassandra. But Grimes didn't see the magic. She thought the idea of a witch trying to live a normal suburban life was just too silly, so she walked away. That decision opened the door for Montgomery, who, being married to the show's producer, William Asher, stepped in and became television royalty. But the casting drama didn't end there. The role of Darren was first offered to Dick Sargent, who passed due to delays. Then Richard Crenna declined, leaving room for Dick York, who, after 5 seasons and a back injury, was ironically replaced by none other than Dick Sargent. Dick York left the show due to health issues. When Bewitched returned for its 6th season, fans immediately sensed something strange, and it wasn't witchcraft. Darren Stevens, the mortal husband who had spent years trying to keep his sanity in a world of spells, suddenly had a new face. Dick York, who had charmed viewers with his warmth and exasperated wit, was gone. In his place stood Dick Sargent. No explanation, no farewell, just change. Rumors swirled. Some whispered that York had clashed with Elizabeth Montgomery. Others said he had fallen out with the producers or fought over contracts. But the truth was quieter, sadder, and far more human. Dick York's exit wasn't born from ego or drama. It was born from pain, real and relentless pain. Born on September 4, 1928, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, York's path to Hollywood began humbly. His father was a salesman, his mother a seamstress, and it was a sharp-eyed nun at his parochial school who first spotted something special. She encouraged him to pursue acting, and by 15, he had landed a steady role on the radio show That Brewster Boy. His voice carried the sincerity of someone who could make you believe anything. That gift, raw, earnest, and deeply human would later make him perfect for Darren Stevens. By his 20s, York was in New York City chasing bigger dreams. He acted in radio soaps, married his childhood sweetheart, Joan Alt, and built a family that would eventually include 5 children. He found work on Broadway, sharing the stage with the great Deborah Kerr in Tea and Sympathy in 1953. Hollywood came calling soon after, and Columbia Pictures signed him to a contract. And it seemed like York would have a long, promising career, but fate had other plans. In 1959, York was cast in They Came to Cordura, a rugged western starring Gary Cooper and Rita Hayworth. It was during this film that everything changed. One moment, he was filming an ordinary scene, pushing a handcar down railroad tracks. Next, his life was split in two. Now, instead of lifting the expected weight, I was suddenly, jarringly, lifting his entire weight off the flatbed, 180 pounds or so, York recalled years later. The muscles along the right side of my back tore. They just snapped and let loose. That one motion left him in agony. But instead of resting, he powered through. He kept filming. He kept working. And the pain never went away. For years, he managed. Roles in The Untouchables, Route 66, Dr. Kildare, and Rawhide kept him busy. He was a professional, pushing past the discomfort. But by the time Bewitched began in 1964, the damage was catching up. As Darren Stevens, York brought humor and humanity to a role that could have easily been overshadowed by magic. He was the mortal anchor to Elizabeth Montgomery's enchanting Samantha, the everyman trying to keep his life normal while chaos twirled around him. Behind the scenes, though, things were getting harder. York's back pain grew unbearable. The studio built a special setup for him on set, a board he could lie on between takes so he could straighten his spine and relieve pressure. Crew members would help him stand or open heavy doors during filming. He tried to manage the pain with prescribed medications, including codeine, muscle relaxants, and sleeping pills. But eventually, the line between coping and dependence blurred. By 1968, York was fighting an addiction he hadn't asked for. In 1969, during the filming of Bewitched, he collapsed on set and was rushed to the hospital. He knew in that moment that his time on the show was over. Still, he handled his departure with grace. When asked about it, he told the Sacramento Bee in 1969, "5 years as Liz's husband on Bewitched. There are no hard feelings. I just want a chance to do other stage and movie roles." But deep down, York knew his health wouldn't allow that. After leaving Bewitched, he made one of the hardest decisions of his life: to quit his medication cold turkey. It was brutal, but he was determined to reclaim his body, his mind, and his life. Sadly, his career never recovered. The offers stopped coming, and the industry moved on. He took odd jobs to support his family, relying on welfare and unemployment checks to stay afloat. By the 1980s, York resurfaced briefly with small appearances on shows like Simon and Simon and Fantasy Island. But the spark of his earlier career had dimmed. Years of smoking caught up to him too. 3 packs a day left him battling emphysema. By 1986, he was living in Rockford, Michigan, relying on oxygen to breathe. Yet even then, York didn't fade quietly. He turned his pain into purpose. Drawing from his own struggles, he started working to raise awareness for homelessness in America, a cause close to his heart, especially after growing up during the Great Depression. He understood what it meant to lose everything and still keep going. On February 20th, 1992, Dick York passed away at the age of 63. His body was frail, but his spirit, that same warm, weary, wonderfully human energy that made Darren Stevens unforgettable, never dimmed. And so, when fans noticed a new Darren on their screens all those years ago, they didn't know the truth behind the switch. They couldn't see the man behind the character, the pain he endured, the fight he waged quietly, the dignity with which he bowed out. Dick York didn't just leave Bewitched because he was sick. He left because he had given everything he had, body and soul, to a role that made millions believe in magic. And when he couldn't go on, he did what only the bravest do. He let go. The actress who played Gladys Kravitz kept her terminal illness a secret on set. Every great show needs a nosy neighbor, and Bewitched had one of the best. Gladys Kravitz, the woman who always saw what no one else did. Alice Pierce brought her to life with such sharp comedic timing that you would never guess the pain she was hiding. Behind her bright eyes and frantic energy, Pierce was fighting a battle no one on set knew about. Just 4 months before joining Bewitched, she had been diagnosed with incurable ovarian cancer. But instead of stepping away, she chose to work, to laugh, to perform, to live fully while she still could. Her dedication paid off in the most bittersweet way. Alice passed in March 1966, just before winning a posthumous Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress. Her legacy lived on when Sandra Gould stepped in as Gladys, but no one ever matched the courage behind Alice Pierce's unforgettable smile. Elizabeth Montgomery was pregnant in real life during Season 1. Here's something most fans never noticed. When Bewitched first premiered, its star Elizabeth Montgomery wasn't just hiding her magic. She was hiding a baby bump. Montgomery, who played the ever-graceful witch Samantha Stevens, was actually pregnant in real life during the show's first season. But producers decided to keep that under wraps. Instead of writing it into the script, they dressed her in flowing gowns, high-waisted dresses, and cleverly placed props to disguise her growing belly. At the time, Montgomery was married to the show's producer, William Asher, and together they had 3 children during the series' run. While the first pregnancy stayed off-screen, the next 2 became part of Bewitched history. When she was expecting her second child, the writers decided to expand the Stevens family. And that's how little Tabitha was born, both on-screen and off. By 1969, when Montgomery was pregnant again, Samantha and Darren welcomed their on-screen son, Adam, perfectly mirroring her real life. But the Bewitched magic didn't stop with Elizabeth. The Asher-Montgomery children grew up to make their own mark in Hollywood, just behind the camera. William Asher Jr. worked as a production manager and writer through the 1980s. Robert Asher became a screenwriter and producer on shows like Room Crashers and BattleBots. And their youngest, Rebecca Asher, built an impressive career as a director and script supervisor on hits like Knocked Up, Anchorman, and Donnie Darko. So while Samantha's story may have been one of spells and suburban chaos, behind the scenes, Elizabeth Montgomery was living her own version of magic, juggling motherhood, fame, and a legendary role that still enchants the world decades later. Elizabeth Montgomery was married to director Bill Asher. Before she became America's most beloved witch, Elizabeth Montgomery was already Hollywood royalty. Acting ran in her blood. Her mother, Elizabeth Daniel Bryan, was a Broadway actress, and her father, Robert Montgomery, was one of the most respected actors and producers of his time. But behind that family name was a complicated childhood. Her relationship with her father was strained, and that wound followed her into adulthood, shaping the way she loved and who she chose to love. Elizabeth married 4 times, each union telling a different story. Her first marriage to New York socialite Frederick Gallatin Kaman in 1954 seemed perfect on paper. Her father approved, and the press adored them. But Kaman wanted a traditional wife, and Elizabeth wanted the spotlight. Within a year, it was over. She returned to Hollywood, chasing something bigger than comfort. In 1956, she married actor Gig Young. Charming, older, and deeply troubled, Robert Montgomery was furious. He saw what his daughter refused to. Young's alcoholism and violent temper turned their marriage into a nightmare. One Elizabeth eventually escaped in 1963. Years later, Young's story would end in tragedy. He murdered his 5th wife before taking his own life. That same year, Elizabeth met Bill Asher. the talented, fast-talking director who would produce Bewitched. Their chemistry was undeniable, both on and off the set. They married in 1963 and became one of Hollywood's golden couples. But fame and passion can be volatile. Asher, already separated from his first wife and juggling multiple affairs, wasn't built for quiet love. Elizabeth eventually found herself drawn to another man, director Richard Michaels. Their affair shattered both marriages, and by 1973, Elizabeth and Asher were done. Still, Asher never stopped loving her. Friends said he cried for her until the end of his life, blaming himself for losing the only woman who ever truly bewitched him. Samantha's nose twitch was inspired by Elizabeth Montgomery. That iconic little nose twitch, the one that made Bewitched instantly recognizable, wasn't special effects or camera tricks. It was pure Elizabeth Montgomery. Legend has it, the famous twitch came from her own natural habit. Whenever she got frustrated, she would purse her lips and move them just so, making her nose appear to wiggle. Her husband and Bewitched director, Bill Asher, noticed it one day and turned it into Samantha Stevens' signature move. It became television magic, a simple human gesture transformed into one of the most unforgettable spells in TV history. Dick York and Agnes Moorehead were BFFs behind the scenes. On screen, we all know that Endora couldn't stand Darren. She made his mortal life a living nightmare. But off-screen, it was a completely different kind of magic. Agnes Moorehead and Dick York were actually the closest of friends behind the scenes of Bewitched. While their characters constantly clashed, the two shared a deep, genuine bond built on mutual respect and quiet understanding. Moorehead, a devout Presbyterian, admired York's spiritual depth and the way he carried himself through pain and hardship with grace. She often praised his talent and his heart, calling him one of the most sincere men she had ever known. When York's health forced him to leave the show, Moorehead was reportedly devastated. She respected Dick Sargent as an actor, but to her, Darren Stevens would always belong to the friend who made her laugh between takes, the man she affectionately called her soul brother. The special effects team had to get very creative. Before CGI, before green screens, before Hollywood could make magic with a click, Bewitched was already doing it with wires, pulleys, and pure ingenuity. The show's magic didn't come easy. It was handcrafted by a small but brilliant team led by special effects wizard Dick Albane. They had to make Samantha's world feel real in the 1960s, when technology was anything but magical. Take Samantha's famous self-running vacuum cleaner, for instance. No CGI there. The prop team rigged a reversible motor underneath, controlled by offstage switches, making it one of TV's earliest robot vacuums. And when Samantha's luggage came flying out of the closet, that was an effects artist perched on planks above the set, puppeteering the suitcases with wires like a marionette master. Elizabeth Montgomery worked just as hard to sell the illusion. During scenes where Samantha cleaned her messy kitchen with a twitch, Montgomery had to hold her arms perfectly still, sometimes for so long they ached, while the crew rushed in to reset the scene. They eventually gave her crutches to rest her arms between takes. Behind every magical twitch and flying object was sweat, timing, and creativity. The real spell that made Bewitched timeless. A lesser-known spin-off ran for one season. Long after Bewitched cast its final spell, the magic wasn't entirely gone. It just took a new form. In 1977, ABC tried to rekindle the charm with a spin-off called Tabitha, centered on Samantha and Darren's grown-up daughter. Played by Lisa Hartman, the adult Tabitha was now in her 20s, juggling her own career, her powers, and the same kind of mortal versus magic chaos her mother once faced. But despite the familiar sparkle, the show never quite found its footing. With no guest appearances from her famous on-screen parents, Tabitha lasted just one season before quietly fading into TV history. The infamous scene that took Bewitched of the air for good. Before Charmed, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or even Sabrina the Teenage Witch, there was Bewitched, the show that started it all. Premiering on September 17, 1964, Bewitched brought magic, mischief, and heart to television in a way no one had ever seen before. For 8 sparkling seasons, it made audiences believe that a little witchcraft could fix almost anything. It wasn't just funny, it was comforting, timeless, and somehow completely human. But like any great spell, its magic didn't last forever. The show had everything: comedy, heart, and a world that blended fantasy and reality with perfect balance. Fans adored watching Samantha juggle her magical world with everyday life, from nosy neighbors to demanding bosses. And of course, her meddling mother, Endora, played brilliantly by Agnes Moorehead. When Samantha and Darren welcomed their daughter, Tabitha, in Season 2, the series added a new kind of sweetness. Viewers couldn't get enough of the couple's attempts to raise a half-mortal, half-magical child in a perfectly normal world. But while Bewitched remained a fan favorite on screen, behind the scenes, the magic was fading. By the final seasons, the set was a very different place: tense, tired, and running on fumes. Elizabeth Montgomery's marriage to the show's director and producer, William Asher, was falling apart, creating a strain that was impossible to hide. What had once been a partnership built on love and creativity had turned into quiet resentment and exhaustion. The cracks in their marriage began to seep into the show itself. The earlier blow came when Dick York, the original Darren, was forced to leave after Season 5. York had been suffering from chronic pain ever since a severe back injury on a 1958 film set, and by the late 1960s, the pain, along with the medication, had become too much to manage. One day, he collapsed on set and never returned. Without warning or even explanation, he was replaced by Dick Sargent. To audiences, it was jarring. York's warmth and chemistry with Montgomery had been central to the show's heart. And while Sargent was talented, the shift felt off. Some fans adjusted, others didn't, and many point to that change as the moment Bewitched started to lose its magic. By Season 8, the sparkle had dimmed. Ratings slipped, Montgomery's enthusiasm was fading, and the writing began to recycle old plots. Then came the final episode, The Truth, Nothing But the Truth, So Help Me Sam, which aired on March 12, 1972. You'd think after 8 years the show would go out with something grand, a finale that tied it all together, or gave the characters the closure fans had waited for. But instead, Bewitched quietly ended with an episode that felt familiar. In fact, it was nearly a remake of a Season 2 episode called Speak the Truth. In it, Endora gives Darren a magical pin that forces him to tell the truth. What follows is classic Bewitched chaos. Darren's brutal honesty threatens his job and relationships, but somehow everything works out in the end. There's no final farewell, no curtain call, just Samantha and Darren reaffirming their love, proving that magic or not, honesty was their strongest spell. It wasn't the ending fans expected, but in a strange way, it was fitting. Bewitched had always been about ordinary life with a touch of magic, and its final moment captured that perfectly. No fireworks, no fanfare, just love surviving through imperfection. When the credits rolled, no one realized they had just watched the last episode. There was no official announcement, no farewell special. Bewitched simply vanished from the airwaves, its final spell quietly cast. Yet, even after its end in 1972, Bewitched never truly disappeared. It lived on in reruns, streaming platforms, and the hearts of generations who grew up wishing they could twitch their noses and make life a little easier. A short-lived spin-off called Tabitha aired in 1977, following the Stevens daughter as an adult witch, trying to live a normal life, but it never caught on. And in 2005, Hollywood tried to revive the magic with a movie starring Nicole Kidman and Will Ferrell. A clever meta-take on the original. Unfortunately, it didn't capture the same spark, and Bewitched went back into its bottle once more. Still, the fascination continues. Recently, plans for an animated reimagining centered around a teenage Tabitha are underway, proof that even decades later, Bewitched still has a little stardust left to sprinkle. What Bewitched episode is still your favorite to this very day? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.